Has anybody here ever been in a one-sided text fight? You perceived this whole conflict, and it was happening all day, and you just are really, really angry, and you're going through your day, and maybe you even bring a friend into the drama, right? And it's totally understandable how you can build this story and this narrative because, there's context that's missing. We heard Layla's keynote this morning, and she talked about how the importance of context around things, right? So when we're in Slack, when we have DMs in these texting apps, we miss context. We miss facial expressions, verbal, nonverbal cues, intonations. And so we get in these one-sided arguments, and the other person didn't even know that you were in a fight. I had something similar happen a while ago. So I was super mad at my partner, Jay, and I was giving him the silent treatment for like 2 days, and I was mad. You know the kind of mad I mean, right? Where you're like, all right, we're going to bed mad, like I'm passive-aggressive in front of the children mad, like, I don't know, you better talk to your father about it. He's sitting like right there in the room, right? And so I was on my position, and I knew that I was right. I knew it, and I couldn't believe it, and he had offended me, and so finally, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I stormed into his office, and I walked right in, and I said, well, are we going to go to bed again, third night in a row angry, or are we going to talk about this? He stopped what he was doing, turned to me, and he's like, okay, I want to talk about it. I was like, well, it's not going to be pretty, because, you sat at our kitchen table last week, and I couldn't believe it. You insulted me, you offended me, and how are we going to get over this? We have to live together. I'm so upset. And he started in, and he was like, I'm really sorry you feel that way. Oh, you're really sorry that I feel that way. And I went on about how could you have said this at my very own kitchen table in my home? And I just laid into him. And then finally, when I came up for air, I paused, and he said, he just got right to it, and he was like, babe, it didn't happen. I was in Nashville last week. I wasn't even home. My name is Christina Aldan. I'm a speaker, trainer, author, mentor, and I'm based in Las Vegas. I sit on the board of directors for a mental health nonprofit, as well as a tech nonprofit. And if you want to continue this conversation online, you can use the hashtag Lucky Chaos. I want to say thanks so much to NDC Oslo. This is my third time speaking at the conference, although this is only my first time remembering speaking at the conference, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But right now, I just want to say thank you to our sponsors for your support. Yeah, so I live in Las Vegas, and this is a picture of me at one of our pool parties. I love pool parties. And even though my hair is blue now, it used to be like purple and orange right around my face here. And so in order to go into the pool, I have to tie it up in a little top knot so you can't have your color fading, right? So when we have a pool party, I tie it up in the top knot, and that way my purple doesn't fade. So November 2023, I was getting my hair refreshed with my stylist, and I sit down, and we're getting my hair done, and she said, what's going on here? What's going on with your hair? Did you cut it? And I was like, what do you mean? You cut my hair. Why would I cut my hair? She's like, but look at your hair. What's happening here? I was like, well, it's been kind of scruffy up in the front like lately. I just figured it's the humidity, whatever. I just really haven't been brushing it a whole lot. She's like, no, look at how short it is. What's wrong with your hair? And I was like, I don't know. Like, it's fine. And she said, okay, well, I don't know. I guess we'll work with it. And I was kind of quiet the rest of the appointment because I was like, what does she mean? What's she talking about? Like, what could have happened to my hair? I don't know. So I was at home that night, and I was meditating, and I had 2 flashes while I was meditating. And the first vision that came to me was a tuft of hair in a hair tie on my counter, on my bathroom sink. And the second vision that came to me while I was meditating was me looking myself in the mirror with a menacing smile, taking the tuft of hair and burying it deep in the trash bin, hiding it. And suddenly, everything started to make sense, and my brain started to connect the dots. My conversation with my hairstylist, like, how come my hair was all weird? And suddenly, those two visions, I kind of realized that 2 weeks before, during our Halloween party at the pool, I had torn out my own hair without realizing it. One-sided arguments that never happened, self-harm that I don't remember, and delayed reactions that make the ground shift beneath my feet. Because when you have a kind of realization like that, it makes me like want to vomit. It takes the wind out of me. The ground kind of shifts. And this is what it's like to live with dissociative identity disorder. I got a late-age diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder when my husband died under horrific circumstances, and I'm not going to talk about that today. But my system, which had been functioning without co-consciousness for 42 years, suddenly broke apart. And personalities and parts that were never aware of each other suddenly became aware of each other. And since I first became aware of my other personalities, there have been about 50 that have come forward. And I say about 50 because some of them, they kind of merged here and there. Some of them, they evolved like Pokemon, which is kind of funny. And so it's hard to count them exactly. But there isn't any medication that can help. And, some of my personas, they'll come forward from time to time based on emotional triggers. And if the emotional triggers are strong enough, they'll present. So they never go away. And they might go dormant, but they'll just kind of tuck away into my heart, and that's it. If you want to hear what it's like to live in that kind of insanity, I did do an entire YouTube series about it, and episode 3 specifically kind of applies to this talk today. But the persona that tore my hair out, her name is Trina, and she's 10 years old. And she was very, very active part at the time, and it was utter chaos, because she would do things to get back at me for, doing things that she didn't like. She doesn't like socializing. She doesn't like pool parties. And she certainly doesn't like me speaking on stage in front of people. So this photo was just 2 months later when my baby hairs, they started to grow back. And my hair did eventually grow back. And Trina did eventually kind of feel bad about hurting us. And 6 months after that, I even paid to have hair glued onto my head to kind of help Trina's shame about the whole situation. And, although this is an extreme situation for somebody like me who lives with a personality disorder, everyone has the ability to dissociate, right? At some different level. It becomes pathological when you get amnesia. And 1.5% of the population, of the global population, can do this, like me. And so it's very unlikely that maybe you've experienced something as traumatic as, tearing out your own hair from an alternate personality. But people without mental illness dissociate too. You've done this before. You get on the train, you're listening to a podcast, you walk home, and you don't remember the train ride, right? That's normal dissociation. If something pulls your attention back to the train, you totally have the agency to do that. I lack that agency. And so as a multiple, I know the difference between when the core personality, is daydreaming during a ride home versus a full dissociative event when I will completely black out. I grew up in extreme poverty as a child. I'm a little nervous. I haven't done this talk yet. This is the shack where my family lived for a little bit with no plumbing, no insulation, no running water. And I suffered a lot of bullying and abuse as a child. So, all of that meant that the adults around me, they didn't really have the skills to teach me how to thrive. I was just surviving most of my childhood. And dissociating became my coping mechanism. It's something that we learn before the ages of 4 to 5 years old, and before our physical or emotional pain can be processed in those ways. So today we're here talking about ways to overcome challenges in the midst of chaos, and how we can grow and become more resilient humans. So if I can overcome pain against all odds, I hope I inspire some of you to do the same. And I don't share these personal stories to stand up here and indulge myself. I share them to let you know that chaos can be overcome and that I'm living proof. So if I can give just one person hope to move through their adversity, to process it, to seek help, to talk to professionals, and develop those coping skills to move forward with their life, then it's totally worth it for me to stand up here and be vulnerable. So these techniques, they've helped me and my mentees and my clients not only manage their stress, but to use it constructively, right? And transforming moments of chaos into opportunities for growth. And I started at the very bottom, and I had to come a lot more levels just to get where I'm at today. There's a myth about life that, we all want perfection, and we all think that things should be perfect. We want complete certainty, stability, predictability, and we're surrounded by uncertainty. And if you're like me, you're completely surrounded by chaos. But here's the thing, chaos creates resilience, right? Chaos is a natural part of life. It's inevitable, and when we embrace its inevitability, instead of fearing it, then we can learn to see it as an opportunity for growth. And you're actually probably more resilient than you realize. I mean, every time we overcome a challenge or process those big emotions, we grow, we improve, we learn, right? And the more we do that over and over again, we strengthen that resilience muscle. And so when I started learning the skills to cope with chaos and embrace it instead of dissociating from it, I developed a stronger, more adaptable mindset. I developed emotional resilience. And I'm going to teach you the ways that I learned over the last 7 years. But first I want to talk about what emotional resilience means. I'm not talking about seeking trouble. To be perfectly clear, don't go seeking trouble and trying to pick apart every single annoyance, right? Because that's so annoying when you're trying to turn every single thing into a teachable moment. The one thing to recognize, it's one thing to recognize opportunities for growth, but it's another one to just lean into the drama, and that's not what I'm talking about here today. This quote from Einstein perfectly exemplifies emotional resilience. I kept showing up even when I was feeling guilty, even when I was feeling shame, even when I was feeling embarrassment for things like tearing out my own hair. And over time, I watched these patterns of dysfunction and emotional triggers. And so, as I stand here today, I can say that I've never been healthier or happier or, I just don't have a whole lot of struggles that I can't overcome these days because I've learned coping skills to help overcome them. And now I just cope in healthy ways instead of dissociating. I process. Sometimes it would take 4 to 5 days for me to recover my mind after a traumatic episode. And, the muscle soreness, the brain fog, the nerve pain, it would just be debilitating. So I had to learn some new skills. And with a lot of help from my tribe and professional help, I was able to improve my responses. Emotional resilience, it's our ability to cope with and recover from the stress of challenging experiences, right? It's how we adapt to adversity. It's how we bounce back. We cope, keep hope alive. It's how we grow. What it's not responding to conflict by just going with the flow, right? It's not thinking about rainbows and sunshine and then, our problems are just going to disappear. That doesn't work. It's not avoiding conflict, and it certainly isn't muting our emotions. Just because you're staying stoic and you might not be expressing your emotions, that doesn't mean that you're not having emotions. And it's not inherent. Resilience is a coping skill that's sharpened by strategy. And so it's like a muscle. It grows stronger with use. And we can build more emotional resilience. We can turn chaos into our advantage. And over the long term, with practical techniques, these lead to sustainable changes. So some of you out there might be like, I don't know, Christina, embracing chaos, that leads to burnout, right? While chaos can certainly be like overwhelming, it doesn't have to lead to burnout. It's how we respond to the chaos that matters. But if we're just going around reacting, putting out fires, then yeah, that's when burnout happens. Another thing is that skeptics might say that emotional resilience is something that we're born with, and it's not. It's something that we can learn. It's a skill that we develop, and a lot of us don't like to hang in there over and over again and keep showing up and work through that pain. But we can set ourselves up for success by consistently using physical, emotional, and biochemical strategies to overcome adversity. And another thing is that people might say that focusing on chaos just creates more chaos, right? It will make people even more anxious, but I'm here to remind you that the goal isn't to dwell on the chaos. It's to embrace that it's inevitable, and how can we use it to our advantage? By shifting our focus from fear and leveraging it for growth, we come from a much more empowered position. And one barrier to embracing the inevitability of chaos is this stigma surrounding mental health, right? Like I said, I'm a mental health first aid trainer. I certify people in mental health first aid. Doesn't mean I'm an expert, doesn't mean I'm a doctor. It means that I can help stabilize somebody and support somebody who's going through a mental health crisis or an emotional crisis, and then help them get to a doctor. Right? When we have the language, when we have the tools to talk about mental health challenges, then we reduce the stigma around it, and we help remove those barriers to getting people the help they need. So we can reduce the stigma around mental health. And once we learn these skills, we've got to remodel them. Because here's the thing. When we're stressed out and the whole team has lost morale and everybody's upset with each other and nobody's talking to this person and the front end's not talking to the back end and the sales team's not, what happens is that really somebody's got to interrupt the pattern. Somebody has to break that cycle. So go first. Model it. Model the behavior that you want to see in the world and co-create those solutions together with your team. And one important thing to note is that there's nuance to these situations, right? Sometimes even I get them wrong. Just because I'm in a hurry to make my kids stop doing this thing or make the team member just be more compliant. And I lose the nuance sometimes. But the reality is that other people have their own agency. And so really, if you want to be really effective, leaders have to inspire. They have to model the behavior, and we inspire change in others in that way so that people want to take action. As we go through the rest of this talk, I want you to think about how you can identify where chaos is showing up in your life. So ask these questions. Where does it show up more often? Is there a pattern? And how can I interrupt that pattern? I'm going to share with you the ways that I've learned how to do it in a bit. But first, I want to talk about the ACEs assessment. Has anybody heard the ACEs assessment, ACE? It's Adverse Childhood Experiences. And so I'll give you a copy of my slide deck at the end. You don't have to take this down now, but you can take this assessment later and save the link. And take the assessment and see what kind of adverse childhood experiences might be shaping your world and how you respond to chaos. You could take it to your counselor, your therapist, whomever, and discuss your results. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, there are 8 dimensions that contribute to our overall well-being, 8 of them. And we have to take care of ourselves and manage these 8 areas of our lives. My environment, my physical well-being, these are the 2 that I struggle with personally, and they'll really shift everything up over into chaos if I don't. If I don't sleep well, it will cause, a traumatic episode in my brain, and it'll just throw me off for 4 or 5 days. If I don't eat well, that's another thing. If I'm not physically doing something, then that anxiety and things will build up. So that's important too. So let's talk about turning chaos into your advantage. Productive chaos. sounds like maybe it doesn't go together. But productive chaos means we're channeling that uncertainty into creativity. And we have to be willing to accept the chaos so that then we can work within it, right? And the first time that somebody helped me kind of accept the chaos was right here at NDC Oslo when I was speaking, or I should say when speaker Christina was speaking the last time she came. But the first time I ever spoke at NDC Oslo, Professor Felina Hermans, yeah, she was the one who taught me about plotters versus pantsers. Has anybody heard about this before? Plotters versus pantsers. Like, there's a creative process for writing where plotters are the people who get everything together and they understand the plot and the character development and everything that they need before they start writing. And then pantsers are more like me, where they kind of fly by the seat of their pants and at the very end, everything all comes together. And so she was the very first person who gave me permission to embrace my process and embrace my own creative process. I'm a bit of a pantser when it comes to creative projects. So embracing this about myself, it's lifted a lot of shame about how I work and how I write talks and things like that. This is kind of what it looks like for me. First, the work begins, the project begins, and I'll get it, and I'll get super excited, and I'll jot down a bunch of notes, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to get into it. I'll get my research, and then life kind of happens, right? It gets a little chaotic, and then something will bring my attention back to it, and I start to panic. Oh, it's coming. Oh my gosh, I got that talk at NDC Oslo. Is it even ready? Where's my slide deck? Am I going to what? Right? And then all of a sudden the rest of the work gets done like just before the deadline. And for a teeny tiny sliver of time, just way at the end, you could barely see it, I might celebrate. And then I jump back into the next project. And I used to just really, really hate that about myself and be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Now I embrace the process, and I embrace it so much that even when I was writing this talk and getting everything together and I got nervous, I was like, oh, I don't know. I got that talk. Oh, that's all right. You're still in the procrastination phase. Don't worry, you'll get there. Just trust the process. It's okay, right? And in this way, I'm using time as the lever for activation. So it causes a little stress, causes a little panic, but as a result, the chaos becomes creativity, right? And it's that motivation for action. And this is what I mean by productive chaos. I accept my process, I embrace it, and then I set myself up for success in those moments. When the work begins, I front load everything that I know I'm going to need. I throw in some research along the way, and whatever, sure. And then panic comes, and then all the work gets done. Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald just released this book last month, and she discusses the barriers to joy. And that's me, right? I have a problem celebrating at the end of the process, right? And when we're hyper-fixated, when we have a trauma-informed brain like I do, we hyper-fixate on danger, and we're always looking for things that are going to not be safe. And so she wrote this great book about how we can take in joy and learn how to celebrate. So, I just didn't used to celebrate much, not holidays, not birthdays, definitely not completed projects or marketing campaigns. And, it makes it really hard to take in the joy and really embrace it. So if you're like me, you might reject joy, and we might end up feeling like an imposter in our own life. So I'd have all these good things happening around me, right? People are going, oh, wow, you're going to Oslo to speak? That's amazing. This is so great. Third time, and I'd be like, yeah, if you only knew how crazy I was. And so, I don't celebrate. So these are some of the skills that I've learned to help build up emotional resilience. I have practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced until they became a part of my life and how I do things, because that's how change happens, through small, intentional changes over and over and over again. That's how sustainable change happens. And slowly, by shifting, my behavior over and over, I've been able to improve the quality of my relationships and my results. And I hope these things help you too. If you were to just pick like 2 or 3 things that you can walk out of here with today and start practicing for the next 3 months, you're going to see some pretty incredible results. And then pick a few more things for the next few months, and then pick a few more things for the next few months, and just keep going, right? You got to kind of approach this with a growth mindset. And resilience, remember, it's a skill, it's a muscle. So if you stop using it, then, it's not going to work so well. So just try these tiny little experiments. There's a learning curve to this stuff, just like anything, and you're not going to get it right the first time. The other thing to consider is that cultural context is really important. So for some cultures, it would be more stressful, actually, to show vulnerability to a friend versus showing vulnerability to a professional therapist, right? So you kind of have to take those things into consideration as well. And so if what I'm saying doesn't fit, then take what you can use and throw the rest away. Right? And certainly, of course, if you have concerns about your mental health, then please talk to a professional, mental health professional, and not a motivational speaker with a mental illness, right? Because I'm definitely not an expert. I'm an expert in my system. But even within that, with DID, every system is unique and every system is different. So resilience strategies, they can be structural, they can be biological, they can be emotional. And so I have grouped all of these into 3 different categories to kind of help it be a little bit easier. Remember, I said that I really struggle with emotional, with physical. So those are things that I focus on a lot. So make a list of strategies that might work for you that you can walk out of here with today. Because the goal is that you want to interrupt the pattern. So if you identify, here's some chaos showing up in my life, and you can see it or you can feel it. Like for me, I start to get like this swirling in my head, and I'm like, shh, 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 no. And you might hear a little voice in your head, and you're like, oh, I don't know. And not voices like I hear voices in your head, I mean like, your inner voice. But you might hear that, and you're like, I'm just going to repress it. For me, I can't repress those things because they start to press on my skull, right? Trina, for example, she wants to fight. She wants to dig in. And maybe even there's a little part of you under certain circumstances where your ego wants to fight. It wants to get on your position, just like how I was at the story at the beginning, right? I was like, I am so right, and I can't believe that you're so wrong. Of course, the conversation, that fight never happened, but, we can get on our position, and then suddenly we start to dig in. So, the best thing to do is if you're noticing something, count to 5 and then just make a choice. And that's why I say make a list of some of these things that might work for you, these strategies, because then you can go, I'm on my position, and I'm so mad, and as soon as you acknowledge that, within 5 seconds, just make a choice and pick something, because a lot of times it's the willingness to use the tool. It's not so much the tool itself, but it's the willingness to use the tool. When you tell your body, actually, we're going to shift this. I'm willing to. I maybe don't really want to, but okay, I'm going to use this tool because Christina said, and she can do it with 50 personalities, and I sure as hell can do it with one. Like, And so, it's important to do that, because otherwise, for me, if I don't do that and one of my personalities gets triggered, then forget it. They'll take over. My core personality just gets sucked in, and I black out, unfortunately, and it just becomes complete chaos. So a structural approach to emotional resilience, it involves healthy living environments, our family relation structures, social support systems, community resources, or systems for mental health care, right? It means having systems in place that we can set ourselves up for success. And this is a really great book I like. It's called Mental Models. Pretty much anything Peter Hollins, he has some really good books out there. But I like this one because it's direct, it's to the point, and it's very efficient in that way. So this is a really good book, and I recommend everybody read it. Here's a good one. I was having a particularly bad week with my mental health. And even though my personas, they didn't want to, I was like, you know what? I need to get out of the house. I am going to this networking event. So I go to this networking event at somebody's house, and we're in line for food. And dude comes up, and he's like, hey, Christina, what's up? How you doing? And I was like, oh, man, I needed to get out of the house. I am having a week. And I really wasn't very forthcoming about my mental health back then. But I was like, I'm not doing so well, and I've got a lot of challenges right now. And he said, oh, yeah, the thing about challenges and conflict is that they're inevitable. And I looked at him, and I was like, oh, man, like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, conflict is going to come. You may as well just expect it. I was like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, think about it this way. When conflict comes knocking at your door, you'd be like, oh, conflict. Hello, I've been expecting you. Hello. Why don't you come on in? Sure. And he said, just usher it out the back door as quickly as possible. I was like, wow, what an interesting concept. Here I'd spent my whole life going, challenges, conflict. No, I don't want it. I'm just going to dissociate from it, right? Here he's talking about greeting it and then ushering it through the back door as swiftly and quickly as possible. No, don't take off your shoes. You're not staying long. No, you may not use the bathroom. No glass of water. Here you go. Usher them out the back door, shut the door, and lock it. Hey, if conflict comes coming back, knocking at the door again, no. Nope. I am not letting you back in. And I thought, wow, what a really great framework to have. And so now anytime challenges or conflict come through, and, as developers and you're pretty good at predicting things. So we can predict what things might be coming down the way. And that way, when they come knocking on the door, you can go, oh, hey, how's it going? Hi. No, don't take off your shoes. Come on. Right? Another thing that we can do is we can pause and we can gather data in the face of adversity, right? What are the facts? This is really, really helpful for somebody like me who has DID because sometimes I don't know what's real and what's not. In fact, there have been entire months of my life where I didn't know what's real and what's not, where I couldn't tell the daytime from the nighttime because my consciousness was the same. I would go to sleep with the same conscious mind that I would wake up with. It's weird to say it and think about it if you've never experienced that before, but it was just the same steady, constant stream. And so think about that. Can you sit in the uncertainty of not knowing and just start gathering up bits of data slowly and digesting them along the way, right? Not knowing is an important part of creating something new. Otherwise, we go back to the old ways. We're doing the same things, right? And so we can integrate the lesson and learn from the experience, and then we move forward as we process those challenges. And this is how we reduce conflict, and we increase our capacity to develop and to co-develop solutions and new systems that work better instead of falling on old habits or old patterns. Here's one: consider the alternatives. Consider alternative paths to the challenges. So you don't always have to take the same path. Is there a path around? Is the path treacherous? Who is out there who can help us? Who can support us? What kind of research do we need? We think that maybe nothing will ever shift our position sometimes. We get on our position and we're just, right? And we hold it onto it like it's our precious. And so I have a personality named 8, and she had a terrifying fear that our house was going to be sucked up by a giant vacuum cleaner in the sky. And it sounds kind of cute, but it's actually really terrifying. And so for a year and a half, anytime somebody mentioned the vacuum or we started to clean the house, I actually would have to leave because I would have a major trauma episode. And this had happened even a couple of times just going to bed, like I'm winding down. It takes a while, set my water, I'm getting into bed, and then some thought would trigger a vacuum cleaner, and she would be terrified that our family was going to be sucked up into a giant vacuum cleaner in the sky, and our family was going to die, and our pets were going to die, and she absolutely would not consider any other alternatives. And it took a long time. It took 1.5 years of working with my therapist for her to process those data and really understand that we weren't going to die. It became a survival thing for her. And, you know, I'm living proof that even the most outlandish beliefs can be changed and shifted, like being sucked up by a giant vacuum cleaner. They can be turned around if we're willing to consider other options, right? Another tool is to consider the extremes, and this is a really good structural framework for processing challenging situations. Consider the extremes. So I'll ask myself, all right, well, what's the best possible outcome, right, that we can hope to achieve? What is the worst possible outcome that we hope to achieve? There's a lot of black and white thinking, like especially when you're young and when there's children, and I have a lot of smaller parts inside my brain. And so when we consider extremes, what happens is it gives us perspective to recognize that, oh, there are all these gray areas in the middle. And that's really where the problem solving happens. And so by considering the extremes, we can really gain perspective, and we understand that, all right, well, we can work within these boundaries. Now what's possible, right? Otherwise, what happens is we think, for me anyway, I end up ruminating on things, or I end up catastrophizing over and over and over again because the worst possible thing is going to happen. Another way to get a fresh perspective is to consider how you would advise friends or clients or family, you know, in similar situations. And I call this the body double framework. So I put a stunt double into my place, almost like in a Hollywood movie where they have an action film and they put a stunt double in. And this helps me shift my perspective so I can get a more empathetic perspective on the situation, because I remove myself and I insert a body double. Adaptability tells us that our inner world can adapt very quickly when we're regulated and we're processing data well, but traumatized areas inside of us, they don't really allow for adaptability because trauma keeps us frozen in time in those little snapshots. Each one of my personalities is like a small little snapshot of me of when the trauma occurred. And you know, I wasn't able to process that trauma then, so my brain can siphon off and fragment it for processing later. And then I work with mental health professionals to unpack it. 50 times, 50 different people with different traumas. And, you know, it was worth it. It was a lot of work, but eventually they stopped interrupting my life and I can live a normal-ish life now. So today, for all of us, there are more data running through our nervous systems than ever before, right? We have real-time data all the time about any point in the world at any time about what's going on. And so it's a lot. It's a lot to process. It's a lot to digest. And the best way to do that is to connect with other people so we can process them together and we can co-regulate each other. And research shows that when we connect with others, we experience a shared sense of community, and we can come up with problem solving much better. So I would just want to say, be mindful of people who might be draining you, though, right? Energy vampires. It's important to set healthy boundaries when we're creating community, because humans are social beings, and connection helps us overcome adversity. Practice reaching out to people. That becomes your community. The people that you engage with, the people who you talk to every single day, that becomes your community. And my community right now is wonderful. They show up for me even when I don't want to show up for myself. And for some people in my community who found out that I had a diagnosis, that was the last conversation we had, which is fine. It was kind of painful, but you know, it is what it is. They weren't my people. So the American Psychological Association wrote in its resilience report that many studies show the primary factor in resilience is having a caring and supportive relationship, multiple relationships within and outside of their family. Relationships that create love, trust, provide role models, and offer encouragement and reassurance, they help bolster a person's resilience. So one way to connect with others is to become a learner, right? Find some mentors. Who here has had a mentor before in your career? Have you had a few mentors along the way, right? Yeah, that's great. And so mentors are wonderful. They provide empathy. They provide advice. They provide, hey, this is how I overcame similar challenges, right? I seek advice from a wide range of people, and I've learned a lot of important life lessons from my mentors. They might suggest books, research topics, and they give examples of options that might work for overcoming challenges. The other thing we can do is we can become a mentor. Does anybody here mentor other people? Yeah, that's awesome. We give back to our community, and that's how we can connect with people, because we teach best what we need to learn. And so we often learn best through modeling behaviors, through teaching others, through processing through those cooperative experiences, those shared experiences. I really enjoy being a mentor. And there was a time when I was like super depressed and I wasn't looking forward to getting up and starting my week. So what I did is I created Mentor Mondays, and I put all my mentorship appointments on Mondays. So I was starting out my week just feeling great and helping people out. Another thing to do is to change your scenery. Our environment can really influence how we feel. And so that's why I live in Las Vegas, where it's super sunny all the time. I get depressed when it's rainy and cold and cloudy. And I also make sure that I get out in nature. I go up to the mountains to snowboard, to hike, to go camping and play out in nature, because that's when I get really refreshed and rejuvenated. So control what you can about your environment, because your environment should be as safe and as healthy as possible. And the last thing for structural is, in structural category, is that I had to examine my work-life integration. I don't say work-life balance because I don't believe that exists. But work-life integration, how am I integrating them together? Because suddenly I couldn't work 50, 60 hours a week. When my brain broke, I couldn't work 50, 60 hours a week anymore. Now I could show up for a one-off appointment with a mentee. I could do a few things here and there. I could go do a 1-hour talk, but then I'd have to go home and just crash for a week and recover. So, my mental load was just super heavy. There was a time where I had to take 1 or 2 naps a day just to kind of process and to let my brain and my nervous system rest, because I was having so many panic attacks. It was like my nervous system couldn't recover before the next panic attack came, and then just when I was starting to feel like I'm regulated again, something else would happen, and it was just overwhelming. It was just like every day was a fresh hell. But we can build up more emotional resilience when we create these frameworks for processing challenges and difficulties. So the next category is biological. I want to talk about some neurochemical processes, genetics. These are like hormonal imbalances that are associated with our biological resilience. I love the sunshine. Remember, I love pool parties. I live in Vegas. I love the sunshine. And we need 15 to 20 minutes of sunshine a day if we want to actually start creating vitamin D, which helps with depression and feelings of well-being. So go get some sunshine on your skin 15, 20 minutes a day so that it can directly shine on your skin and you start producing more vitamin D. And if not, then take supplements. For one point in my life, in the last 7 years, I didn't even leave my closet. I had a personality who lived in my closet, and she was terrified, and she never even wanted to come out. And so I was taking supplements because that helped. But, I just would watch Hamilton reruns and play Animal Crossing for hours and hours and hours. And I didn't see any sun. So it's important to get some sun. Self-care. Self-care is important. And when I'm talking about self-care, I'm not just talking about a bubble bath. I mean, bubble bath can be a part of that, right? But self-care is the stuff we do so that we function optimally. So I'm talking about eating right. I'm talking about getting enough rest, going to the dentist, getting a massage, taking your supplements, hanging out in your garden. All of these things involve self-care. It's what we need to do to function most optimally. So consider that you might need some self-care if you're really stressed. If it's been a while since your last self-care session, you might need some self-care. Or if you've helped others recently who overcome some challenges. I would bet that everyone here has experienced these recently, right? We could all probably use a little bit of self-care. Biologically, we have this quality called mirror neurons. Has anybody heard about this? Mirror neurons? Mirror neurons means that we match the countenance of others. It means we can take advantage of this biological quality when we experience a pleasant person, right? Remember I said earlier, be intentional about who you connect with in your community. Be intentional about the people that you surround yourself with. We have the ability to pause, match the other person's tone, and then adapt our speed, our cadence, our volume, and therefore our mood. So, try it sometime. It works. Go find a pleasant, happy person to hang around and be like, oh, wow, actually, I really like that person. You start to feel a little more cheery, a little more upbeat yourself. And equally and oppositely, if you're hanging out with somebody who's always like, you're going to feel the same way, because biologically, we are all wired with mirror neurons, right? And so be very mindful about your verbal and your nonverbal actions. I think this quote exemplifies that perfectly. It was painted on my friend's gymnasium at this school. Attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching? So, a panic reaction is contagious. It's just as contagious as a calm state of mind, right? So remember those mirror neurons. Maybe count to 10, or maybe practice the skill of being able to say, active listening or without judgment, or tell somebody, oh, that's interesting, tell me more, right? You can practice these kinds of verbal phrases. Although I do have a word of caution about that. Deception cues. Deception cues are nonverbal signals that you do want to avoid, right? I want you to be really cautious of those, because there's this potential of inadvertently giving the wrong cues, and then you might be pushing people away. So it's not effective to use a question inflection when you're talking to people, because then they're going to doubt you. It sounds like you're self-doubting, right? Or a volume drop. Have you ever talked to somebody and you're like, oh, yeah, well, we could do this or that. I'm not sure. Right? That's very difficult to have those kinds of cues with people if they're signaling that. Incongruous body language, right? You don't want to be down here like this. You want to be open when you're talking to people. Be mindful of your facial expressions. For somebody like me, sometimes under duress, I might have a couple little personalities kicking around, pressing on my skull in the background, and I can't really do it, but they have their own facial tics. And so I might be talking to my partner and he might be telling me something that we don't like, and I might give a snarl or give something, and he'll go, see, that. You could tell Trina that it's okay. And I'll be like, what are you talking about? And so my family will recognize it, or my friends will recognize it before I will, because I don't have that co-consciousness sometimes. So facial expressions, they can signal things sometimes that just really aren't effective in communication. And context cues. Context is very important, as, again, Layla talked about earlier. Although one little thing about context when you have DID is context with food. It's like a really unexpected, not cool thing that I experience. And that is, I'll be eating, and I'll switch, and then I'll come back, and I'll switch, and I'll have something in my mouth. and I don't know what it is. It could be scrambled eggs. It could be mashed potatoes. It could be, and like, it'll just be the grossest thing. It could be rice pudding. It could be the most delicious thing ever, and I don't even know because I don't have the context around it. And Core Christina, has just come forward with a mouthful of something weird in my face. So I have spit out my food before at the dinner table, and my children are like, Mom, that's not right. Don't do that, Mom. No, stop that. Like, that's not okay. And it's funny. Physical expression is really important if we don't want the extra adrenaline and cortisol building up in our bodies. So, for example, for a while there, I was waking up at 3 a.m. every night. So we have a natural spike in cortisol every night at 3 a.m., and that's fine. That's just a normal part of sleeping. It's a natural part of our lives. But if you're waking up at 3 a.m. every night, it's because you have extra cortisol that hasn't been processed. So if you're doing that, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. every night, then, something that you might do, things that I've tried is I'll drink a glass of chocolate milk before bed or eat a little bit of ice cream because it helps process that extra cortisol. And then when I get the cortisol spike at 3 a.m., it's not enough to wake me up all the way, right? I can sleep all the way through the night. Another thing that I do is I'll do push-ups. And I don't just do regular, normal push-ups. I do push-ups so that I burst the floor away from me. Like I'm trying to move the building. I really try to embody whatever anxiety or whatever anger or big feelings are coming through. And if you can't do push-ups, then do push-ups on your knees. And if you can't do push-ups on your knees, then push away the wall and do wall push-ups. But really embody the anger and the feelings and try to move the building. And that's a really good way to physically and biologically change your chemistry. Another thing you can do is, I've done this before, I did a little TikTok video once actually, about you could go into your bedroom and just lock the door for 5 minutes and just throw yourself on the bed and have a toddler fit. Like, who doesn't want to just throw a fit every now and then? And you're just not allowed. It's not polite. It's not, we're all grown-ass adults here. Don't go throwing a fit, right? But I can go into my room, lock the door, throw myself on the bed, pound the bed, and just be like, right, and let it all out. Because that physical expression is very important. Remember I talked about earlier about being stoic and not showing big emotions does not mean that you're not having big emotions. So they have to be expressed. Unexpressed anger will often, you'll either volcano and you'll explode all over everybody, or you'll implode, and that can turn into depression, and nobody wants that. And lastly, I want to talk about emotional strategies for building up resilience. These strategies involve things like your self-esteem, hopefulness, emotional self-awareness, and your spirituality and your purpose. Finding meaning in disruption by reflecting on the situation is really good for resilience, right? So think about the chaos and think about what the chaos is trying to teach you. What's there and what is it trying to teach me? How can I move it? How can I shift it? You can reflect on the situation. You can meditate. You can write, journal. You can read books from spiritual teachers. And this is going to help you to process that. You can reflect on what triggered you, what emotions are there. This is what I do. You can have a conversation with yourself. I have conversations with myself, but it's the same thing, right? And you can process these, and it's a lot easier to suddenly notice patterns. And eventually, you start to recognize. You could just do the math right there on the spot when the big emotions come in, and you won't have to go and journal every time because you start to build up that resilience and you start to process right on the spot. Reframing. This is a great technique. Reframing adversity is a wonderful way to go back and reevaluate the challenges as opportunities. And so there are a lot of different reframing techniques, and this is how my current therapist teaches my brain to reframe a traumatic event. It's really incredibly powerful, and when your mental health professional can kind of safely guide you into the deepest dark corners of your brain and then use those symbols that you're using to lift you up out of it, you'll experience permanent change right then and there. It's incredible. So first, what we do is we identify the emotion. within that memory. And then gently, safely, she kind of leads me into the snapshot of that moment, the environment, the smells, what happened, where was it, right? And then in an objective, non-judgmental way, so it's not triggering and going to re-traumatize me. Next, we shift that pain so it's not stuck anymore, right? Now remember, I said small little snapshots. I have like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 3-year-old. I have a toddler. I have all these different parts in my own brain. And so if I can help them realize that, hey, it's okay, my adult brain now has the skills to process this, we process it right then and there. We deal with it. And then we put it in the proper timeline. Because remember, I said that trauma or these emotional triggers that get us stuck, we're essentially stuck. That part of us is stuck in that timeline. We're always going to remember it. You hear people say this, I remember it just like it was yesterday, right? There are plenty of details that we don't remember that happen, billions and billions of bits of data that we never even reconsider. But for some reason, these little frozen moments, if the signal is strong enough or repetitive enough, will really get stuck in there on those emotions. And so we remind them, hey, everything worked out. It's cool. We're good. And then we put it in the proper timeline so my temporal lobe understands that I'm no longer stuck in that moment. And the next step is that we visualize letting it go. We let it go with wind or water or fire or some other way. Trina really loves to burn everything up. She'd burn everything to the ground if she could. But fire is usually her preferred way of letting things go. The final step is to let that snapshot of myself know that, you know what, you don't need to stay in this moment anymore. You do not need to stay in this frozen time snapshot. Where do you want to go? And I'll send her off to a happy place somewhere. So this process is, like I said, it's different with everyone, and I wouldn't recommend doing it without a professional, but I often will just immediately pass out wherever I am. Like sometimes I've been in therapy and then just pass out in therapy, session over, done. And I just take a nap. Sometimes if I'm with my partner and something happens and I process it, boom, I just pass right out because my brain is working so hard because I just got that data that was very, very difficult and couldn't process, and now it's solved. What does that mean? That means that everything else, everything that came after that has to be reframed and catch it up to now 49-year-old Christina, and that I can feel my brain working. In fact, it's almost like I get a cramp. A DID headache is very specific, way different than any other headache. It's like I get a cramp right in the center of my brain, and it's blinding. And so sometimes I'll lose my words, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 hours for them to come back because my brain is working so hard to process the information. And this is very common, for me anyway. I get very nervous, and, multiple personalities will kind of be at the surface, and I'll start stuttering. That will happen. Or, I'll say the wrong thing. Or I've done this before, super embarrassing. I say the exact opposite thing of what I mean. That sucks. So reframing technique is really powerful, and it's a great way to rewire your brain. Self-awareness and mindfulness practices are proven strategies for managing chaos without losing your center. So, it might just be a quick check-in. Where do I feel relaxed? What's going on with my body? Have a cup of tea. Just bring some mindfulness into your awareness. Be vulnerable. Vulnerability trips the empathy switch. When you're vulnerable with somebody, I'm not talking about oversharing or being inappropriate, but when you're vulnerable with another person, it creates that connection and that empathy. Create your own opportunities. We can create our own luck, right? Confirmation bias is a quality that tells us what we focus on, we're much more likely to get more of. So if you're focusing on more luck and that you're a very lucky person and you're a lucky girl and you're getting great results, then you're going to get more of that. Pay attention to your nonverbal communication. We talked about that earlier, the nonverbal cues and your body language. And choosing your words very carefully. This has impacted a lot of my healing and my emotional resilience. This is how it shows up in my life. When one of my personalities is in complete chaos and they're having a meltdown, right? The question is, how can I support you, right? What resources and information do you need? Let's just explore a few different options together. And the last one is to make a good first impression when you're connecting with people. 82% of first impressions are based on things like body language and words and how you present yourself. So make sure you're presenting with open body language, you're smiling, and doing your best to appear warm and competent. So what? I hope I've convinced you that chaos is not the enemy, and in many cases, it can be viewed as a tool for growth. Stress is not always a bad thing. It's how we respond to the stress that counts. That's what determines our long-term outcomes. And I want to encourage you to shift your perspective and view chaos more as an ally so that you can build up a more resilient life. By improving our emotional resilience, this helps us become better leaders, creatives, and innovators. It makes a better world. And I want to share a quote with you, but before I do, I said I'd give you my slide deck, so I'm going to ask for some feedback here. You can scan this and download my slides. Just enter the word chaos. And it does have a box for email, but I've only sent 2 emails in the last 3 years, so you don't really have to worry about me spamming you. But you can scan this, download it for later, talk about it, share it with other people. And then I want to give you this quote. Who's heard this before? Hurt people, right? It means that people who are hurt will have a tendency to hurt other people because they really haven't learned any other way. But I really want to take this a step further. Hurt people, but luckily, mended hearts mend people. Brave warriors empower people. Hopeful voices uplift people. Courageous souls lead people. Wise mentors teach people. And liberated spirits free people. Thank you very much.